This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
In the name of God, amen. First and foremost, Happy New Year. Today is the first day. Thank you, choir, for responding. It is the first day of a new church year, and so it is that we begin our journey through Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Eastertide, and Pentecost, returning again to last Sunday, the Feast of Christ the King. But we assume somewhere in the back of our mind that because it's Advent and 4 weeks before Christmas, that we have to do what the world says, which is buy, shop, be crazy, act insane, and do really silly things as far as I'm concerned. Being a Christian, for my money, is very counterintuitive, countercultural, ultimately. Because though we talk about Advent as a season of preparation, the world out there says, you're getting ready for Christmas, and it's all external. It's the bright lights, it's the packages. It's also the depression that hits very often also. But the church says something very different. It says, prepare, keep awake. But it's about an internal journey that we begin during Advent. We prepare, yes, but not as the world would have us prepare, but as we would be invited to journey inward into the center of our being and see whether there is preparation there. But we have a gospel reading this morning that's a little rough around the edges. It's kind of end time kind of thing. And it is about the second coming. And the second coming is as paradoxical as Advent always has been. Because we await the second coming, but we don't know the hour or the time, and it means ultimately the consummation of the ages, the end of time. And so we kind of push that way out of our mind's eye. And we get caught up in the things that we do to prepare for Christmas, failing to recognize the very essence of Advent and that internal preparation. There's a story, and it goes with that gospel as well as the reading from Isaiah. There's the story of the little boy who asked God, "What's a minute like to you?" And God says, "Well, it can be 1,000 years. Well, what's a penny like to you? Well, it can be thousands of dollars, millions of dollars." And the little boy says to God, "Well, can I have a penny?" And then God says, "In a minute." But the reality is about that preparation and that being ready for what may come. For me, Advent is much more about who we are and what we're about as individuals and as a community of faith. And if you will, I believe it's much more about believers needing to dig in and stay faithful and be prepared for the long haul. But those lessons, that gospel particularly, speaks about doom and destruction, speaks about the moon and sun not offering light, speaks about magnificent or scary as it was in the Middle Ages particularly, eclipses and things not being as they were. And we live in a world where a lot of that goes on. If you will, there are times when, to reuse Susan Russell's phrase, there are times when we take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. And there is some of that this Advent. Eclipses, massive storms that hit Brisbane, Australia, that they have never seen the like of. But of course, climate change isn't anything we have to worry about. Ha. My own comment, thank you very much. We also see the events in Ferguson, Missouri. And we think about that and say, well, that's far away and it really doesn't affect me, but it is who we are. It is about who we are. And it is about 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. But what is this Advent to do with that? It is being prepared, being responsive, being aware, being awake, and ready. If you will, the season of Advent invites us to wait impatiently for the consummation of hope, longing to know God as fully as we have been known, to see no longer through a dark pain, but face to face, to love as we have been loved, to experience Jesus Christ as he is, and in so doing to become like him. Advent preparation. There is an absurdity in that paradox, the reality of the paradox that Advent is. And if you will, it's a reminder that we need to enter into that. To enter into that, not knowing, but being ready. Paradox, absurdity, how do we address that? How do we live in that knowledge? We live in that knowledge through our faith in Jesus Christ, and it is about faithfulness. It is not about perfection or doing it right, whatever that may be. If you will, an important part of Advent is preparing for the day when God will ask what we did with our lives, with our resources, and what we did with this world. That's the question that awaits each and every one of us. It's not for someone else to answer for us. It is for us to answer. I know I usually use this poem almost every Advent, but I absolutely love it for what it says. The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are these words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep we're vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Yeats wrote that in 1919, at the end of the First World War, when chaos seemed so prevalent. We still live in those kinds of times. To me, the events of Ferguson speak to that. 2 steps forward and 1 step back. This past week, a young football player for the New Orleans Saints, I know, our immediate response, oh, dumb jock. His name is Benjamin Watson. And he wrote this piece that appeared in Huffington Post. And I won't read the whole thing, but he speaks to an issue that we all need to be addressed, that we all need to address. I'll read the first paragraph and his thoughts, but it is an incredibly elegant and eloquent statement. At some point, while I was playing or preparing to play Monday Night Football, the news broke about the Ferguson decision. After trying to figure out how I felt, I decided to write it down. And here are my thoughts. I'm angry because the stories of injustice that have been passed down for generations seem to be continuing before our very eyes. I'm frustrated because pulp culture, music, and movies glorify these types of police-citizen altercations and promote an invincible attitude that continues to get young men killed in real life. I'm fearful because in the back of my mind, I know that although I'm a law-abiding citizen, I could still be looked upon as a threat to those who don't know me. I'm embarrassed because the looting, violence, protest, and law-breaking only confirm, and in the minds of many validate, the stereotypes, and thus the inferior treatment. I'm sad because another young life was lost from his family, and the racial divide has widened. A community is in shambles, and accusations, insensitivity, hurt, and hatred are boiling over. I'm sympathetic because I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly what happened. Maybe Darren Wilson acted within his rights and duty as an officer of the law and killed Michael Brown in self-defense, like any of us would in the circumstance. I'm offended because of the insulting comments I've seen that are not only insensitive but dismissive to the painful experience of others. I'm confused because I don't know why it's so hard to obey a policeman. You will not win. I'm introspective because sometimes I want to take our side without looking at the facts in situations like these. Sometimes I'm just as prejudiced as people I point fingers at, and that's not right. I'm hopeless because I've lived long enough to expect things like this to continue to happen. I'm not surprised, and at some point, my little children are going to inherit the weight of being a minority and all that that entails. I'm hopeful because I know that while we still have race issues in America, we enjoy a much different normal than those of our parents and grandparents. I see it in my personal relationships. I'm encouraged because ultimately the problem is not skin problem. It is a sin problem. Sin is the reason we rebel against authority. Sin is the reason we abuse our authority. Sin is the reason we are racist, prejudiced, and lie to cover for our own. Sin is the reason we riot, loot, and burn. But I'm encouraged because God has provided a solution for sin through his Son, Jesus, and with it, a transformed heart and mind, one that's capable of looking past the outward and seeing what's truly important in every human being. The cure for the Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, and Eric Garner tragedies is not education or exposure, it's the gospel. So finally, I'm encouraged because the gospel gives mankind hope. Advent is a season of hope. Advent is a time to reflect on who we are and whose we are and how we are to respond to one another. Hope, the second coming, being ready. It's all about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen.